useful information. The reality is by 9 or 10, most children are watching really graphic pornography online that involves women being choked, women being violated in tons of different ways. There is stories of a sex educator that I know was talking to a teacher who one of the boys turned to another boy and said, she overheard them saying, how do you know when you're having sex? And the other boy said, if she's crying, you're having sex. That this is the reality, that men's violence towards women and the types of sex that we see in pornography is dominating how young people and young adults are having sex. Most women under 30 will talk about the fact that they've regularly been choked during sex. Like, we have got an absolute crisis on our hands around this stuff, and the idea that schools and teachers just have to go, children don't like to talk about this stuff, is absolutely unacceptable. This is a terrifying situation where boys are sexually harassing girls, they're sexually harassing their teachers, because we've created a context where this stuff isn't being talked about in a safe way or a helpful way. And so I think this idea that we shouldn't be talking about this stuff because it's problematic or it's tricky doesn't mean that that's helpful, because the fact is that the culture that these children and young people are swimming in is very different than 30-40 years ago. Of course the conversation is different when every young person holds a device in their pocket that can watch the most graphic sexual violence that 30-40 years ago most adults wouldn't even have imagined existed.
Yeah. Imagine trying to come up with a uniform set of guidelines from government, the Department of Education, to teachers around this area, and imagine trying to do it by September. I mean, it's got to be left in the hands of those who are asking or being asked questions, or if it is in fact their duty in a classroom to address these matters, then it's got to be left up to them, hasn't it?
Well, it has to be that we do a lot more work equipping parents to have these conversations, because the reality is parents are their children's primary educators. And I think that our current context is one where parents send their kids to school and see the school as having the job of educating. No, it's like parents are the primary educators. And I think it's a really, really hard job for parents. We're British. How many of us as adults are comfortable talking about sex? Never mind with our children.
Appalling.
And so there is, the evidence and the research shows that, unlike your previous caller, children and young people do want their parents to be guiding them on this stuff, obviously in an appropriate way. But the reality is that it's got to be about us having a much broader conversation than scare tactics about what is or isn't being spoken about in schools. And we have to be responsible about this. It's really important that campaigners, that politicians and others don't use this as point scoring, because the costs to making this about, our children being taught this thing or this thing, is that children and young people are not going to get the education that they need and deserve so that they can grow up into healthy adults having healthy sexual relationships.
I think there's